Well, hello guys, and thanks for joining me. I bought a new camera and it did me a dirty trick. So you're not watching an old Japanese film with a bad English voiceover. I'm just doing a voiceover for this first little bit here. We're going to dig right into restoring these gauges for the 48 Fleetmaster. Going to pull off the gauges from the backside using removing the little screws. But first, a guy can't forget to take his thumbnail picture. Almost messed that up, eh? Anyway, remove the gauges, and you can see we have a fuel gauge that was just flopping around in there. I will also say that this dashboard has already been repainted once. It's not original anymore, so the brown that I use here in a little bit to repaint the face of the cluster was just a generic brown off the shelf at Ace. Now we're going to remove the pinch, the crimp that holds the whole thing together, and I would highly suggest, if you're doing this, remove it on the bottom side. That way, if it doesn't look perfect when you go back together, you won't even notice. Should just have to do the sides and the bottom, and the whole thing should slide out of the top crimp there. Now remove the intermediate face plate and everything comes out. The amount of rust and corrosion was even more than I expected once I took it all apart. Now I made an attempt at cleaning up the glass, the lens, but unfortunately our screen printed labels for each of the gauges was completely deteriorated away from having so much water, I suppose, sitting here for so long. So in the end we had to order a new one.
Alright, now before we move on with the rest of the gauge cluster, I think we need to really check out what's going on with our actual gauges and just test out what we need to fix, replace, what's okay. I don't want to go through the bother of putting new gauge faces on bad gauges, basically. Definitely things are going to have to get a little more serious with the fuel gauge, which broke off its moorings, you know. But I've got the temp gauge set up here, so let's check that one out. Alright, so I've got our temp gauge set up here. Hope my camera's being cooperative. We got a mug of well water showing 46 degrees on there. And I brought in some boiling hot water. Probably gonna make a mess of this. That's okay. But I just want to go a little at a time. Oh, that's just... Hey. We're getting there now. I got nothing better here. So our first increment, you know, the needle's already on 100. So we certainly need to surpass that. This is great on my work surface here. I may have started with too much cold. We were at about 100. The needle has come up a little bit. Go about to half again with this. Okay, reset yourself. This is turning into just great moments in history here. Okay, still showing about 100. Needle is definitely coming up. We're about 120. It's obviously not boiling anymore, so there's going to be limits to how hot we can make this. 140, we're about, yeah, I'd say we're halfway between 100 and 180. I really wanted to get up around 200, but I really think it's safe to say it's working no matter what. $165-ish. This shows just below 180. You can see that. So, even though we didn't achieve a full sweep of the gauge, I'm pretty sure this is reading and it is accurate yet. So, very good. Oh. I think I was holding it with my thumb. Let's go back. Alright, I've got regulator. When I'm on the air, it's about 10 psi. Showing about 15. Yeah, it's actually showing above that on the regulator. So let's go down a little farther. Not much different. Try to get to 20. It's about 20 exactly, and we're halfway between 15 and 30. You know, it's not exact, but it's... not the perfect test, probably, but it's certainly doing the thing. And at least somewhat accurate. So I think that's good. Alright, over here on the workbench I've got a battery with a 6-volt headlight burning. I hooked my charger, 10 amp battery charger, to it, and it was acting like the battery was fully charged. So whether we get it to turn on or not, I don't think I have an old school battery charger here. So if we get it to click on and off and go towards charge, you know, that'll probably be good enough for me for now. So let's see here. What we need to do, I've got my headlight hooked up there. Try not to short anything out on this metal table. So I'm going to click one side. Okay. Yep, absolutely. Let me get you zoomed in here. See if I can do this so you can see the light against the gauge, or the gauge against the light here. Okay, fairly obvious. We got a discharge when I hook the light to it. So that's working. Let's not short anything out here. Negative charger clamp. Too many alligator clamps in one place here. Still doesn't want to turn on. every time the charger goes, we got a positive charge on the gauge. All right, we've got our gauge kind of mounted up in the vise here, and I'm going to hook my gauge testing unit that really probably isn't too reliable anymore, but we're going to give it a shot, see if we have a reaction. Actually, I can already see we do have a reaction. If you can see the needle moving around there, I don't know if we have a wiring connection that's kind of bad anymore or not, but we certainly get a reaction. I wonder if there's a modern equivalent of this. I'm going to have to look around for that. But it certainly appears like our gauge is working. With this thing, we're going to try something else out. I've searched high and low for this is a 30 ohm gauge. These early gauges from, maybe early 60s on back were 30 ohms. After that, they were 90 ohms. I've searched high and low for a 30 ohm, 0 to 30 ohm fuel sender. I was just sure I had one, but I cannot find one. This is out of my 86 square body GMC. It's a 90 ohm. But we're going to see what happens. So just on the bottom quarter of the sweep there, so we have a reaction, which probably makes sense, being that this thing is only going to work for the bottom 30 ohms. Not sure why it doesn't empty completely out on the gauge. But anyway, between those two things, I'm fairly confident that we have a working gauge.
Alright, I'm going to let these guys hang out on the warm heater here over lunch hour. Come back and hopefully they'll be dry enough we can put some stickers on.
Now our gauge face here, basically these are not available. Certainly as far as a reproduced piece, none of this is. The closest you come is Dakota Digital makes something along that lines with all electronic gauges, you know, and it obviously looks not original at all. Otherwise, you can find many examples of something along this line, but it has 4 round gauge pods built into here. Maybe a guy could do something. You know, if you want to keep it original looking, you're out of luck, basically. You're going to have to find an original part, and if the windshield's been leaking like this example, then who knows if you're going to have to deal with this same problem or not. You hold it up to the light here, and you can see we got a lot of, well, it looks like a doily, basically. So, as far as this project goes, we need a reasonable fix for this problem. Yes, a guy absolutely could get some thin sheet metal, cut this out, spend a lot of time forming it, making it. You got to put a crown on it, and yeah, absolutely, a guy could do that. However, I just don't think we're just not in that boat on this project. So we're just going to add metal back to it. Got some USC all metal, basically an aluminum powder body filler type stuff. An excellent filler as far as I'm concerned. Alright, so we're just going to rebuild our metal. I'm going to leave it purposely thick on the back here. Obviously we will need to come back and sand some of it up, but we have a little bit of room to play with on the back as far as clearances go. So the thicker I can leave it back here, the better. Get rid of this. You don't want that in that fold. I saw another pinhole. I thought, well, maybe not. See how we're growing hair out the other side? That's good. It reminds me of being a kid. We would take saltines, we would put margarine between 2 saltines, and then we would squish them together, and then through the holes in the cracker the margarine would grow, basically. Talk about a wonderful snack. Okay, our all metal is sanded down for the most part here. I'm leaving as much as I possibly feel I can get away with on the back side, especially along our edge there. And I think that ought to look pretty good. My main consideration is whether or not I have the crimping room to get it all back together. I mean, my main consideration is that it looks good, obviously, but, you know, in order to look good, we kind of have to get it back together too, don't we? So, it all seems to snap back in together. There's room enough for our glass in there. I'm not worried about that. So, I think that looks pretty good. Alright, I'm going to get this reassembled here, get this cleaned up. Make sure we get all the dust and fingerprints off of this the best we can. Looking pretty good. Now this intermediate piece, there's a lot of pitting on it and so forth. I did clean it up, sand it quite a bit where it's going to be visible, but really not much of it is. Okay. Get that slid in there. Took it back apart. This glass is tending to want to rattle pretty good, despite the fact that it goes together so tight. So, simplest fix is often the best. I'm just going to put a little bit of silicone in the corners, and that should take care of the problem and not make too big of a mess here. Okay, start over again. Well, I had to call in the high dollar help. I asked my wife to come out, and I had to hold this in place on my knee, and she took a dowel rod and a hammer, used that for a punch, and tapped her down, got her into place, and so we got it now. Looking pretty good. So now we are going to install our gauges. Just make sure we get the right ones in the right spot. Shouldn't be too difficult. Like this. Get our little tiny screws that are kind of a pain to hang on to and get started going here. There you go, guys. Just threw an LED headlight, a headband thing behind it, just to get the effect of some backlit bulbs going on in there. I think everything looks pretty good. You know, with the investment in some decals, maybe the glass with the, you know, reprinted gauge labels on there, a little bit of spray paint. You guys can do this. It's not necessary to have to go to digital gauges immediately or the ugly set of the round gauges. If that's what you want to do, fine. But honestly, these old school gauges, they are very rugged and reliable and dependable. You may have to repair something behind them. Just test them and see what you got. Every single one of these, and this was an exceptionally bad set of gauges, having had water at least halfway up each gauge, if not completely full at one time or another. And look at what we got now, and every single one of them still works. So may not always turn out that way, but honestly, what have you got to lose? Just play around and try it out. So guys, I hope that was entertaining, enjoyable, instructive on some level. We got our gauges going again, and that's just another step towards getting that 48 Fleetmaster up and running and back to the owner. Now we can go back, reinstall this, and I'm busy putting wiring harness in, and this is definitely a necessity there. So, thank you so much for joining me, guys. God bless you all. See you on the next one. Bye-bye. Looks pretty good.